This is Transfiguration Sunday. It's a day of transition. It's the last Sunday in the Epiphany season, where we emphasized the glory that is associated with the man Jesus. Now on Wednesday, we turn that model around. And beginning with next Sunday, the first Sunday in Lent, we will devote several Sundays to looking at the humanity of Jesus and focusing on his experiences as a human being. This morning marks a blending of those two concepts. We hear about the man Jesus, whose appearance transformed in front of his disciples, revealing him to be the Son of God. That revelation is confirmed for them, just as it was 6 weeks ago, with a voice from heaven who proclaimed Jesus to be God's beloved Son. One of the characters in that story is the main character in our first lesson. The prophet Elijah was one of the greatest prophets in the history of the nation. He is the prophet who on Mount Carmel stood up against the false gods that were being worshipped by the king and queen, and in fact had a contest with their priests to see whose God was the more powerful. Today we come to the end of Elijah's ministry. He and his successor take off on a journey together. Several times Elijah suggests to Elisha that he remain behind while he himself goes on ahead to meet his destiny. In each instance, Elisha says no and asks for permission to accompany his mentor. And so he is given permission and in fact becomes a witness as Elijah is assumed up into heaven. One of two characters in the Bible who never died. The other being a man named Enoch, recorded in the book of Genesis where it says, Enoch walked with God. From the second book of Kings, chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself lives, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." Elijah said to him, "Elisha, you stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But he said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they came to Jericho. The company of the prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Be silent." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went and stood at some distance from them, as they were both standing by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water. The water was parted to the one side and to the other, until the two of them crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha said, "Please let me inherit a double share of your spirit." He responded, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them. And Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. Here ends the first lesson. Turn with me, please, to page 238 in the front of the hymnal. We'll read Psalm 50, verses 1 through 6. Let's alternately read them. I'll read the odd number verses, you read the even. Page 238, Psalm 50. The Lord, the God of gods, has spoken. He has called the earth from the rising of the sun to its setting. Out of Zion, perfect in its beauty, God reveals himself in glory. Our God will come and will not keep silence. Before him there is a consuming flame, and round about him a raging storm. He calls the heavens and the earth from above to witness the judgment of his people. Gather before me my loyal followers, those who have made a covenant with me and sealed it with sacrifice. Let the heavens declare the righteousness of his cause, for God himself is judge. This is our psalm. You don't see too many women today who aren't practicers of Islam wearing a veil. I remember growing up that my mom was one of many women who, when they were getting themselves all dolled up to go out somewhere, would put on a pillbox hat. After all, it was the age of Jacqueline Kennedy, with a veil across the front. The veil was supposed to indicate that you were refined, cultured, shy, a lady. Veils also have a way of blocking our vision. And Paul makes reference to this in our second lesson for today. He talks about God's glory being veiled. We hear from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 4, verses 3 through 6. St. Paul writes, "Even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For we do not proclaim ourselves. We proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." Here ends the second lesson. In our gospel, there is a notion of togetherness and of being apart. We're going to hear about how Jesus and 3 of his disciples went apart from the rest of the crowd and went up to a mountaintop to pray. Must have been a long prayer time. These guys were obviously not Lutherans, because if they were, Jesus would have been done praying after 57 minutes. But he apparently prayed longer because the disciples fell asleep. And they're awakened by an incredible experience. Jesus transfigured before them. Please rise for the good news of the gospel. This is the gospel according to Mark, the 9th chapter, beginning at the 2nd verse. Glory to you, O Lord. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could reach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it's good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them not to tell anyone about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Using the big numbers at the top of the page, let's sing hymn number 548.